Everyone, welcome to another Overrated Film Saturday. Apologize that this video has to be uploaded late, but unfortunately I was relatively busy yesterday, so I didn't have time to really sit down and think of one particular film to look at that I think is sort of overrated, or a series to look at that is overrated. But after some time thinking, at least today, I had more time and I was able to figure out something to discuss for this video. And I thought perfect timing considering the fact that a film within this series actually just came out recently and happens to already be breaking box office records. So without further ado, let me talk about the Fast and Furious series. Now, again, I don't think these films are bad in the sense that I think they're harmful or somehow degrading or is only for a certain demographic. Even though clearly the filmmakers know who their demographics are, but this particular series, I think, is one of those fun yet kind of dumb series. I mean, it's one of those films where film series or series of films where you kind of look at it and go, yeah, it is ridiculous. Yeah, it is over the top. Yeah, is there a lot of depth to a lot of these characters? No. Is there a lot of interesting plot scenarios? Not really, because a lot of the times the plot ends up confusing you, because sometimes the plots don't really make sense all too much. At least I've noticed that as a recurring theme sort of within this series in particular. But regardless, I think they're still fun and they still have a certain likability to them. But I understand that is kind of overlooking all of the bad stuff that I think's in the series. So again, it's one of those overrated films where I do have some enjoyment of it. I think it is a fun ride. But as far as a film series is concerned, I don't think I consider it anything of substantial film classic material. It's definitely not on par there. But the series has made a significant amount of money over the years. I mean, they're already up to seven movies, and the seventh actually did break some box office records. So it still has maintained its popularity. And I will admit that the first film, I think, actually is good by its standards. I mean, when you look at all of the other films that came afterwards, they are probably not as good or hold up as well as probably the first film does. Because at least with the first film, there was some kind of character, there was some kind of effort put into it. This was kind of a new kind of look into, racing. Because usually when we see racing within films, it's usually going after a bad guy. James Bond being a perfect example. It's designed to be not so much of a race movie as it is about bad guys and good guys. And here, the bad guy and good guy scenario, at least within the first Fast and Furious film, I felt played itself out fairly well for a kind of film that it is. As far as all the other films are concerned, there's probably not a whole lot much to them, because how many more films can you pretty much spell out the exact same thing? There's a bunch of cars, there's a bunch of crazy stunts, you've got the same characters and with maybe a different plot scenario, but at the same time it's pretty much leading to all of the similar elements that we've seen in a lot of the other films, except the stakes might be a little bit more ridiculous, a little bit more over the top, but there's nothing within this series that kind of establishes one film as a standout, except the first film, really. Um, but I understand for what they are. They're fun. But they are a little bit overemphasized, I feel. And and they do have some kind of likability and charm, because I'm not saying that the characters have a whole lot of depth to them. But I think that's why a lot of people were probably drawn to them, and why hence this series continues. And I think a lot of people like cars. They like seeing fancy cars. Um, and maybe they don't mind a bunch of really bad one-liners, because those are a lot of fun to watch if you just take it in. See, this is the way I kind of see the Fast and Furious series, at least discounting the first film. If you go in knowing what you're getting, it's fun. But if you look at it as anything more than that, that's where I think people kind of read into it more than what it actually is. And think it's somehow great, and that we have to have a need to keep putting the same thing out over and over again. Um, but for me personally, it's just one of those series of films where you go, okay, I know what I'm gonna get pretty much. There's a certain amount of predictability to it. And I think that predictability does wear off, especially since a lot of the times, all of the films, I can't tell which one is which, because they're all pretty much the same, except really the first film, where you can tell, like, oh, they're a lot younger, and it makes sense. But a lot of the other times, everything else seems kind of like a blur as far as the other films are concerned. So there's really not a whole lot to, I think, really remember from them, so much as is they're enjoyable, turn off your brain films. And I think they should remain on that kind of a level, as opposed to putting it up on this very, grandiose spectacle, um, and having them make so and so much money over and over again to keep reiterating the same things over and over again. I mean, do you think 7 films would be enough? 7 films would be plenty of the same stuff where you could go look over and over again. And again, too, I think another thing that I think a lot of people felt was sort of a reasoning behind in which they wanted to maybe see this film, was because it was the last opportunity to see one of the actors actually perform, since the actor unfortunately passed away. And yes, I'm talking about Paul Walker. And as far as that's concerned, I think that is a substantial reason as to why a lot of people wanted to really see the 7th film. And again, I kind of understand why this film is overrated. I understand that it is ridiculous. I understand it's over the top. And I understand a lot of people do actually have a lot of fun while watching it. But when, you look back on it, it's just kind of, for the most part, it's pretty much me just kind of looking at it through a blurred image. Like, I'm not really seeing so much of a story, so much of of characters, as much as I'm seeing, just really well done choreographed images, and, some really fun bad one-liners. So, I think that's really what I think people might see these films as. But I think there is some emphasis in trying to put them up on this very high pedestal. And in doing so, we keep seeing more and more films, and pretty much seeing the same thing kind of over and over and over again. So I think that's one particular reason why I find these films to be a little bit overemphasized. Also, I think a nostalgia factor is a really big point, because the Fast and Furious started relatively within the earlier 2000s. So I think that a lot of people sort of probably grew up with, just all of the movies sort of coming out one by one. And I think that's why a lot of people seem to um, think that somehow uh, that this series somehow connects them to their younger selves, because they have spanned out for a consecutive amount of time. Um, and I can kind of understand that, but at the same time, there is a lot of repetition. There is a lot of just, things blowing up, and, them going out and saving the day, and, all of that. Which again, it was sort of a little bit of a repetitious kind of plot scenario, um, which I think a lot of the sequels did. Whereas within the first film, it's between an undercover cop, and then this drag racing scene, and how they sort of collide together. Whereas in a lot of the sequels, they are ultimately, you know, working with police or whatnot. So yeah, there is a lot of things that I think ultimately result in just a little bit too much of a same old. So um, it's fun. I mean, that's the best way to describe sort of the Fast and Furious series. It's fun, but it's nothing like spectacular. It's nothing that screams to you, wow, this is so amazing. You don't, at least for me, I don't really feel an awe when I'm watching them. I'm just kind of laughing the whole time as to how enjoyably fun and dumb they are at the same time. And that's, I think, the true sort of entertainment out of them. They're kind of the guilty pleasure of overrated films. But again, it doesn't scream anything that's really, you know, special or unique. Even though you could argue the first film did at least try to create something that was relatively unique as far as a plot, as far as characters are concerned when it comes to this kind of a scenario with drag racing. But the sequels, again, they don't really amount to much. I think even a lot of people who do like the series actually did not care for certain sequels. So again, it's kind of a toss up as far as, you know, which films you probably gravitate more towards. I mean, I really do gravitate more, obviously, towards the first film because I think it was actually trying, as opposed to the other films, which I feel are just kind of a blur, and you don't really remember much about them. But as far as within the moment, they're fun. It's just they're nothing memorable. There's nothing timeless about them. They're just fun, dumb action movies, like a lot of other fun, dumb action movies that came around during this time. But I think that's really all I can say about the series as a whole. I mean, it's cool. I mean, the market's really, hey, the market's deciding that these films, deserve money. So there's probably going to be an eighth one. I'm definitely sure of it. They're probably going to make a ninth. They may even go to 10. But by that time, I don't know if the actors and actresses will be young enough to do these very ridiculously outlandish and over the top stunts. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this series. I mean, it has its moments, but it's really nothing like it's really nothing to, I think, really get so overworked up for. It's not like it's something like Star Wars, or it's something like Jurassic Park. There's just not an amount of timelessness to it, I'd say. But I mean, it's fun. It's fun if you enjoy this kind of a thing. And for me, I do find some fun and some enjoyment out of them sometimes. Um, but as far as a whole is concerned, they don't really amount to much. Um,
they're just fun for now, but in the bigger scheme of things, not a whole lot to really brag about necessarily. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this series. But again, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.